she was very intelligent, she was very witty, she had a sort of, I mean, not necessarily this is the way I'm going to play it, though. She had, obviously, I think she had sex appeal. She wasn't necessarily beautiful for that time, but she had great sex appeal and a great sort of sexual attraction, but was very flirtatious, had been in France for many years, and had learnt the sort of art of flirtation and seduction. But she was everything, I think, ultimately, that the ideal woman for that, at that time, wasn't meant to be. I mean, she was not, she wasn't submissive, she wasn't meek, she wasn't somebody who withheld her emotions. She was very outspoken, she was emotionally demonstrative, probably emotionally sort of rather immoderate and rather extreme, and not at all retiring or very assertive. And I think ultimately somebody who wanted to be in control of her own destiny, and in that way makes her quite sort of modern. And I think most of her behaviour is probably sort of very informed by what happened to her sister, who was also Henry's mistress, but who had actually 2 children by Henry, but then was sort of cast aside. And I think she saw this and didn't want to be as abused as her sister. Although then, you know, it was a big privilege to be a mistress, but having seen what had happened to her sister, she was determined that that shouldn't happen to her. I think her mistake was that she ended up being political, and but she had a huge power over, you know, for instance, she got rid of Wolsey, and I think after Henry, you know, after said, oh, I don't want to have any more disputatious women, and sort of went to the other extreme and found Jane Seymour, who was, you know, a wimp. but wisely wimpish, or wisely, probably had a lot of character, but wisely kept her views and opinions to herself. So, but she was a bold, dramatic creature, you know, and had huge influence on this man, and, you know, and really did actually was, you know, responsible for a change in our church, and huge change in English history. I think they probably took great pleasure in each other's company. They were both incredibly bright, and they both were very well educated, and they would probably have great discussions on religious reform, particularly. I mean, she was a reformist too. He wasn't, though, so I think she might have been somewhat irritating to him. But at least I think he really enjoyed her company. I don't know about her feelings towards him. I think it would be quite an unrelaxed situation to which to, you know, to be in, you know, to fall in love. In our version, we sort of, it's portrayed that she does fall in love with him, but only once she's got his sort of guarantee that she will be protected by him and that it'll be safe. But she's absolutely terrified, and quite rightly so. So, yeah. I mean, he was a fantastically charismatic man, apparently, you know, incredibly good-looking, 6'4", a Renaissance man, and was incredibly powerful. But so possibly it would have been difficult for him not to be fallen lovable with. But I don't know. She does become queen, but then it's immensely precarious. She realises that once she's queen, which is her first sort of objective, then her main, given that he'd cast aside somebody else, she knows that full well that her marriage could be on, you know, based on that, the possibility that she will be cast aside. So she has to keep him interested, and then the main, her main objective is to have a son, about which one has very little control. And she was, like Catherine of Aragon, incredibly unlucky in childbirth, and had, you know, first of all Elizabeth, and then a series of miscarriages. But then, given the pressure and the stress on the, you know, any queen to produce a male heir, and a healthy one at that, it's not, you know, it's understandable that, you know, they should have miscarried so much, and particularly then when there was so, you know, it was so much more dangerous. But having said that, it's so ironic, given that his whole reign was driven by this obsession to, you know, have a son, and ultimately, you know, his daughter Elizabeth, you know, a girl, ends up being one of the most, and even perhaps, you know, supersedes himself as, you know, a great monarch of our country and history. Being beheaded, that was an honour. That was the nice way out. Usually people were hung, drawn and quartered, and being hung, drawn and quartered, and you were sort of still conscious, you know, by you got to the end bit with the quartered bit. And it was really hideous. But I think also they believed so much more fervently. So it was, you know, the belief that this was just a little passage before, you know, the life after. But that doesn't make any of it nicer, more excusable. But I think there was so much terror then, and it really was an autocracy, and people were always just so terrified of, including the ones at the head. I mean, Henry lived on a state of terror and feeling insecure and feeling that his kingdom was, you know, so precarious. And that's why people just, you know, went every 5 minutes. And, you know, it's pretty much a guarantee that anybody who was at a supreme, you know, position of power, given 5 or 10 years, they'd be, you know, have their head chopped off.